This is Let's Talk Business with your host, Marc Ebinger. Now, here's Mark.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Business podcast. Coming up on the show today, we're going to be having a roundtable chat to learn more about all of the hosts' expertise and kind of what's going on as we wrap up the end of the year. We might get some legal tips, we might get some HR tips, we might get some nonprofit tips, and you might get a few VA tips. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm your host, Marc Ebinger, the owner of Kruka's Virtual Staffing, a company that recruits and staffs experienced overseas administrative assistants for insurance agents and attorneys. Thank you. If you're curious about the most common tasks that virtual assistants are doing for their businesses, head over to the website at krukas.com and grab a list of the top 20 tasks that VAs are doing for businesses just like yours. The link is in the podcast description.
Hi, good morning. Desiree Serna here, your co-host at Let's Talk Business. I am your San Antonio premier publicist and Texas nonprofit guru. Good to join y'all.
So good. Hey, by the way, I got your tips list. Phenomenal.
Oh, good.
It's good stuff.
You like that?
And I think your VA sent it to me.
All right, awesome.
I'm Keaton Frieberg, partner at Texas Suits Law Firm, where we focus on supporting real estate and business owners with comprehensive litigation and transactional services.
Great. Hi, everybody. And I am Alan Utley, and I am a work-life speaker and coach with My Coach Next Door. I would like to work with growth-minded individuals who want to get unstuck wherever they are in their career so they can thrive in work and life.
You know, I think we have a specialist in just about every area that's important with business.
I love it.
On this show, which is kind of cool. Alan, I'm excited. This is the first time that you're coming on as a guest co-host.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I see you got plenty of notes there. You're ready to rock and roll.
I'm ready.
Hey, you're sending me texts. Hey, Mark, what are we talking about? What's going on? What are we doing?
I'd like to be prepared, Mark.
You do, and I appreciate that, right? Takes it seriously. Love it. All right, a quick reminder to follow the Let's Talk Business podcast on all major podcast platforms and social media where you can catch video versions of the show. You can get to everything easily from our website at satalkradio.com. All right, so Keaton, of course, I run a virtual staffing company. I love doing that for business owners, and we're hiring for you right now. How would you label the VA? Is it a paralegal, legal assistant? What's the actual title that you're going to give her?
Sure, yeah. I think for this particular hire, it's going to be a legal assistant.
Legal assistant, okay. Mm-hmm. So as you're going through this process of hiring, you had certain expectations, certain things that you wanted. Can you give us an idea of what you were looking for with that VA? Yeah,
I'm looking for somebody. So I say legal assistant, but there are some paralegal components to what we were looking for this particular hire. So we want this particular VA to be able to understand Texas law, to be able to research, to be able to have an idea or at least loosely understand the process, the litigation process or the transaction process. So a lot of it's quality traits, and I'm looking for somebody who can go out there and do their own research and be handed a task and just be able to take it and run with it.
So how realistic? It seems like for people who don't understand, hiring a VA out of the Philippines, and then you got United States or Texas, attorneys and working and understanding all of that. It's like, is that a realistic ask to find somebody who's got those skills?
Yeah, I think it is if you have your processes and systems in place. If you have templates built out, if you have given them the resources to be able to go and research those topics that you're bringing up, and they have maybe past examples to look at. If they're self-sufficient, I think that's realistic.
Okay. Anything you're nervous about with respect to what she's going to be able to take on, or is it really just a matter of not that she's going to win or lose or fail or succeeds, but just what's the timeline on actually, executing quick, fast, in a hurry? You know what I mean? Doing a great job there, or where's your head in all that space? I'm curious.
The kind of projects that I anticipate assigning to this VA aren't going to be super duper. I don't need a really fast turnaround on them. It's going to be really helpful to have somebody be doing a lot of the work that I used to do. And so I'm not necessarily, because our systems and processes are in place, I don't need them to be, I don't need her to do a super duper quick turnaround or anything like that. Not that they wouldn't be able to, but I guess I really don't have a concern, honestly. I think she's going to be able to do whatever we need, to be honest. So,
and then I guess next question is like when it comes to the quality. So when you and I talked about this, I was like, well, do you want a Ferrari or do you want a Mercedes-Benz, right? Kind of a thing. And he's like, well, I want the Ferrari. So it's like the cost of that is significantly lower than it would be in the United States. What has yet to be proven, in all fairness, is whether or not she executes at that high level, right? And we'll continue. I'm very transparent on how my VAs work. I'm like, I want to know, because if there's a problem, let's get it worked out. But when you're going through the hiring process, and I know Stephen handled a lot of that, did you feel like, okay, yeah, this is like, I mean, was there like unknown? Well, there had to have been unknown, and then, okay, this is actually working. We actually are getting what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So part of your hiring process, you have the applicants submit some sort of a video and touch on a couple subjects. And so I reviewed some of those videos with Stephen, and that moment is when I was like, this might work. Why? Because honestly, most of the applicants spoke our language literally and figuratively. They literally, knew some of the legal jargon, and they were talking about just high level stuff, and I was blown away. So,
So do you think they have some background knowledge then in the legal field?
that was a requirement.
Okay, great.
So
Yeah.
the cool thing is we listed out, Mark's really good about asking a bunch of preliminary questions about what exactly we're looking for, and some sort of background knowledge or a paralegal certificate or something like that was a requirement for this particular hire.
So that legal knowledge was the table stakes, right? The very first thing that they needed to have in order to be considered. So beyond that, how did you decide who the right person is? What's your interview process look like? Is it gut, or is it something more quantitative?
No, that's a great question. I think it's probably a combination of both. So as Mark stated, I wasn't directly the one overseeing this process, but I was loosely involved. But we actually put together a test packet, if you will. So I can't remember if Stephen did what exactly the test packet was, but it was some sort of legal document that they were to read a fact pattern and then look at a past example template and then replicate it with this new fact pattern with a new names and stuff like that. So I mean, I think there's probably a little bit of gut in every hire, right? But there was some sort of background analysis that occurred as well.
Okay.
Yeah, what's cool with those tests is it's a customized test that they prepared. It's like, hey, this is what we want to know if this is going to work or not, right? This is part of their screening process. And then when it takes a couple hours for people to do this kind of stuff, we charge a fee that goes directly to the person taking the test. So they understand I'm going to take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours out of their day, but they're going to get compensated for that.
Okay.
So that's part of our what we offer. Otherwise, you're not going to get people that take that test, or they're not going to put the effort into it, because it's like, well, what am I doing this? I mean, I get picked or whatever. Whether they get picked or not, they get paid to take the test. So, but that only happens for select people that they want to have take the test.
They've been screened. And so what does the onboarding process look like?
Great question. I probably need to build out our onboarding a little bit more.
I know who can help you with that.
So I'm excited. That's a good question. And honestly, it's a little different because the biggest challenge that I'm trying to overcome right now is how to integrate my staff here with our new VA. And so that's something that I'm trying to figure out, how to get everybody to work together, and when they need to work together and how they need to work together, and maybe if they even need to work together at all.
Because you have a local staff, right? I assume most of you. Okay, and then so this will be one person who's now a remote member of your team.
Correct.
Okay, so thinking about how you integrate that person is critical, because what you have is an island now. You have someone who's out there on their own. Will this person work for anybody else, or just solely for you?
That's another good point.
Okay.
Primarily just supporting another partner at the firm and myself.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Do I even need them to interact on what level? And maybe I do. I probably want them to be able to, but to what extent and how?
You want them to feel connected to you guys. So having somebody on your staff, whether it's you or whatever, as their primary point of contact that meets with them. Doing a morning check-in would be great, right? If you have somebody on your staff already that could do that, perfect. They're going to check in and make sure everything is going good. These are what tasks are going to get done today, any special instructions. And then the once a day is like bare minimum when you first start. That's the best situation to have. As you move along, you can just spread that out farther. We meet with our team twice a day, right? And not me. Typically, I'll be on one of them. I'm not necessarily on both of them.
Okay.
But Jennifer, my wife, is heading up that, making sure that meeting gets done. Or we have our HR person, Abby, that will meet with them.
And what are you going over in these meetings?
Just, hey, give me an update. What's going on? So, and then I'll get a rundown of what's going on in the hiring, what's going on my social media team, and then what's going on with my executive assistant, appointments and so forth like that. Any issues coming up. But, 10 minutes, you can be in and out in 10 minutes.
That's what my next question was, how long?
Yeah. But you hit those high points. Everybody should be doing an end-of-day report as well. So
I have to say, I love that you have 10-minute meetings. I don't know how we got to a workplace where every meeting had to be 30 minutes or an hour. I think a 10-minute meeting is brilliant.
Well, that's part of training is like, look, and I've had to tell them, I don't want to be rude, but all I need to know is pop, pop, pop. You know what I mean? This is it. Because let's just get in at it. I don't need to know all the nuances of everything. So
then when you say connected, are you talking about connected to the sticks and the bricks, the operation, or are you also talking about that human connection?
Human connection for sure.
Because that could take more than 10 minutes.
Well, it can, but so we've got a couple things in place for that. So, like my wife will do coffee with them, like once a month or something like that. So she's meeting. Hey, it's a girl talk, right? It's just not really a place for me to do that kind of stuff. It's all female staff.
You could try.
But I don't really want to, if I'm being fair. So she can do that girl talk, and they can kind of go through that stuff. But I always during our meetings will give them like positive feedback. Hey, great job on this. I'm very specific on things and stuff like that.
I'm confused. How do you do coffee with virtual assistants?
Yeah, right. You just do it on Zoom, or
Good
we
old
use Google
Zoom.
Meet.
Brilliant. Okay.
FaceTime.
Virtual coffee. Sorry, Keaton. I
No.
Google Meet.
So is this coffee time happening with like my VA that you're onboarding as well? Or is
Nope.
this just your internal staff?
Just our team.
Okay,
yeah.
because I know y'all do a lot with our, for example, my hire. Y'all they're integrated with your staff as well. Is that right?
Well, they do a weekly check-in.
Okay.
Just to make sure everything's going good, because we like to catch, if there's going to be a problem, we like to catch it early. That's on the client side as well, too. So the clients are getting, time clock in and clock out reports and all that, but they're also checking in, make sure everything's copacetic. So again, catching those problems early is critical to overall success for both the VA and the client.
Okay.
Which is our ultimate goal anyway. So, but it's interesting you brought up about, the onboarding side of things. So, thinking in the VA space, is there something that we should be paying more attention to? Or you don't really know my process, but what do you think is important to pay attention to when it comes to integrating an entire virtual crew together with maybe a legal staff who stay on point with the legal stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's something that every business owner should be thinking about, because what you want when you're bringing people on is someone who's going to be there for a long time and who's going to bring their best work. Yep. And people do their best work people work best where they feel their best. And so that human connection that you're talking about is a critical piece of that. You talked about systems and processes, so that is absolutely there. But then it's about looking out for opportunities to make those individual human connections build relationships with people. So you have to build somewhere into your onboarding process an opportunity to get to know people on an individual basis. So what I would do is whoever they're going to report to, day one, make sure they meet that person and make sure they're asking questions, that they're getting to know each other. And then day 30, have another check-in. If you haven't talked to them in 30 days, though you should have, you probably should be talking weekly. But at day 30, make sure this is a structured part of your onboarding process. Check in. Okay, so how have the first 30 days gone? What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? Is this the job you thought it was going to be? If not, where can we clarify? Day 60, then start talking about development. Start talking about progress. You've been here for 60 days. How do you feel about the work you're doing? And then where do you want to go from here? And yes, it's not too soon to talk about progress and development and growth, because that's where people stay, places where they feel like they can do this job and then do so much more. So having that 60-day process in there, and then at 90 days is sort of a formal review.
Can you go into that again? Why do people stay?
People stay because they feel good about where they work.
And because you said something about progress, being able to do more.
Yeah, people stay with organizations where they feel they can grow and progress. They don't. I would say most people, and this is my view, 25 years working with people take a job for the money. They stay for the people. They stay for the progress. They stay for the development. Do you buy that?
I will like what you just said. It's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can echo that, because I've heard feedback from my team, and like they don't want to ever leave. It's like it's like they feel connected to each other. and they also know that at least from what I'm hearing, we're a good place to work, right? We're good bosses, if you will.
Well, when it comes to human capital, the 3 tenets that I believe is attract, retain, develop.
Yep.
If you as an organization don't have that for your employees, why would they want to stay? So I love hearing that.
Well, the
Alan
danger is getting
realizes
too
that.
transactional, right? To be like, okay, look,
Yes.
you're a cog in a wheel. This do your thing.
Yes.
I'm going to pay you.
A
I'm going to give you
number.
raises. Bop, bop, bop. You know what I mean? People don't connect to that, and that's something and it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
To be the business leader and to see that development from the employees is exciting. It's fun to see it. 'Cause
Oh, yeah.
they're excited to be there, and you know they're going to be loyal and do their best work, which I think
right.
is a point that you brought up. But speaking of all of that, I mean, look, HR is super important. I think as newer entrepreneurs may not take that as seriously because we don't really know the nuances of it or the importance of it. But as you're moving from the point of, okay, I was a job owner, right? I'm a DIYer. We're getting it all done. Now I'm starting to build a team.
Right.
You know, like what are some of the things that we should be looking for as a business owner when we're building that team out from an HR perspective?
Well, again, it goes back to creating those human connections. But then one of the things that's very important, so you've gone from entrepreneur to manager to leader, right? You have a product or a service that people now want, and you need now people to deliver that product or service. So you're not just doing it by yourself. So what's absolutely important is clarity on, as you hire people, what are they actually going to do? Mm-hmm. What am I hiring this person to do? And people talk about job descriptions, but I think it's simpler than that. I'm hiring you to do X, and this is how I want you to do it, but then leave a little bit of room for them to do it their way. Freedom within the framework is a phrase that I like to use. This is the objective. This is the finish line. Now, how do you think we can get there? I'll tell you how I can get there, but I'd like to see how you get there because they'll enjoy it much more that way.
That's a good screening question, actually, because when you were saying that, I was thinking of from a social media perspective. If I'm hiring somebody to be my social media manager, the very base question I should be telling them, or not even a question, but a statement is, look, I'm hiring you to grow my social media channel, right?
There you go.
That is precise and broad at the same time because the main point is to grow my influence on social media, right? And grow my presence there.
Yep.
How you do that, you should already know those components. That's why I'm hiring you.
Right.
Well, that's the freedom within the framework.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, if they don't know what they're doing, you may need to teach them. You may need to train them because sometimes you can hire someone who's very entry level. You hire for value fit. You hire for attitude, and then you teach them your process. You teach them your way, and then eventually they find their own authentic voice and they find their own authentic way to get that work done. And then you let them. And you have to start. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of new managers make is not letting go. Not letting go of how they used to do the work and not letting go of the work itself.
It's like taking the training wheels off the bike. You know, it's risk, it's uncomfortable, but the reward is amazing when you see that kiddo, running without training wheels. It just feels amazing. Yeah. So that's kind of the same thing with employees, providing systems, processes, structure, support, accountability. That's another factor too. I just got off the phone with a guy this morning about one of his failures with his VA is not having an accountability system in place. It's like you have to have an end-of-day report. When you give somebody tasks, you have to have a timeline. I'm guilty of that. We don't have to get 100% right all the time, but put them as SMART goals. Measurable, right? But timely. You got to have them timely.
Right.
Like, I need this done. You're going to set up your Trello board and you need it done by Wednesday, the end of day Wednesday. And I need a progress report on your end-of-day report so I know percentage-wise how close are you being finished as we move towards that date.
Can we talk about accountability in the form of the corrective action?
Sure.
Is that something you guys are familiar with?
No.
No?
I'd love to
Well,
hear
like
it.
spanking them or what do we
Yeah,
do?
well, sure. I mean, that is one way, but this is an area that I feel very passionate about.
Okay.
So in the corporate America space, which I have a lot of experience with, there is this thing that occurs, which is the corrective action. None of you are familiar with this. Okay.
Oh, yeah, disciplinary
You are,
action.
exactly.
I worked internal affairs for 6 years, so yeah, I'm a little familiar with corrective
So
action.
there's my issue, Mark.
Yeah.
You call it a disciplinary action. So my challenge is when
That's how I was raised.
when you're working with people. Like, it's not kindergarten anymore, man. Like, we're not getting check marks and X's for
I
behavior.
was raised in the 80s, man. It's
No
discipline.
stars. We don't get stickers and stars
Stickers
anymore.
and stars, yeah. So what happens is, what I often see is Desiree come into my office, and I'm going to give you this document. This document tells you that you are not doing the job right. You are failing, and I want you to sign this, and then that's the end of the discussion.
Oh.
So that's how we treat it. And that's how it feels disciplinary. That's how it feels punitive. What have I actually done by giving you this document? How do you feel?
Really, like, exactly. I'm getting my hand spanked.
Exactly.
But how are we correcting
So
it?
thank you for asking. So to me, the right way to handle corrective action is to treat it for what it is. It is to correct the action. So before I ever put a document in front of you, we should have multiple conversations about how you're doing, right? Go back to those check-in points. How are you doing? Where are you challenged? How can I help you? And if you're still not getting the work done, at some point, because you're failing to do the work and you're failing to produce on the image that I have for the work, I'm going to have to write something up, because in the corporate space, in order to fire people, you got to have documentation.
Right.
So at some point, we're going to sit down and I'm going to say, okay, so we've talked about this multiple times. Let's get serious about this. I'm going to be clear about what I need from you and what's not working. I'm going to write it down so we're both aligned on it. Now tell me your thoughts and your feedback. How can I help you? Now, do we both agree? Okay, let's both sign this document so we have a record. That brings the human back into accountability for me.
I love to label those as like opportunities.
Love that.
When someone is falling short in one of their tasks, I always like to give it a positive spin. And I love, Alan, that you're bringing light to that. Don't make it so punitive in nature. It's, true. Our human nature is to err. And a lot of employees are different points in their career, have different things going on in their lives. They might not even realize that they are falling short in some part of their task. So approaching it in a positive manner, saying, hey, here is a measurable a metric that we want to measure and hold you accountable. We understand that this has not been held to that standard. Let's create a plan for this type of opportunity.
Exactly.
I think it's great to
Yeah.
spin it in a positive way. It helps retain employees, and it also helps to give commitment to an organization when they are willing to help you become better.
Love that, because nobody wakes up to fail.
No.
Do you? Do you? You?
Many of us do not.
And we just don't know we're doing it sometimes.
Right.
So someone has to bring it to our attention, but in a nice way. I think it's okay to be nice in leadership.
I do too. I'm one of those, I studied leadership theory for a very
Right on.
long time.
Yep.
And I just think it is better for us to use honey.
Agreed.
So, Alan, for people who are business owners, maybe they don't have a full HR department yet.
Yeah.
Right. But they're looking to really have a positive impact on their employees, create that culture that people want to be a part of.
Yep.
What are your recommendations as they move from not having an HR department to understanding that they maybe need to have some support in that area? How do they go through that?
Yeah, so I think that I'm going to work myself out of a job here. You don't need an HR department to create a great culture. You don't need an HR department, though an HR department is there to help you gatekeep that culture. And an HR's job is to work with the leader to help you be the best leader you can be. And then we manage all the risk and the investigations and all those things on the back end. But I think that what leaders need to do is create places and spaces where people can thrive, where people can do the work that they're meant to do and do it well. And the leader's responsibility is to create the conditions that allow for that space. And it's about lifting the people, and the people will then lift the business. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So I use the word lift on purpose because there's a framework in there. Can I go through that framework with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I'm curious for your thoughts on this. So the L is leading with kindness and curiosity, which I'm sure you love, right? Because when you do that, you're unlocking doors that control and command can't. Okay, so that's the L. The I is then, as a leader, what your job is to do is inspire by example, and that draws the blueprint that people will follow. And then there's the F, which is forge strength from talent. So discover the natural talents that everybody has, turn those into actual strengths pointing toward productive outcomes, and that creates the foundation where then you can thrive as a community. Every leadership, every job, every company should be a community of some kind where people can thrive together. That's the T. So that's the framework. Lift yourself to lift your team to lift your business. What do you think about that? I'm curious.
What do you mean when you say, so inspire?
Yeah.
So if you're leading by example, does that mean, what if your roles are different? How do you lead by example when your roles are different? The day-to-day tasks are different. What if they don't even see that?
That's a great question. And I think to me, and I'd love y'all's thoughts too, the answer is to do what you say you're going to do, but then also demonstrate that you're willing to do their work at the same time. And that's for me, that's how you inspire by example. You show them what you want, and then they say, okay, this is how we're supposed to behave here. These are the values that you demonstrate, that you say that you demonstrate. The worst thing is to have a list of values and then no one actually live up to those values.
So I'm gonna beg to differ slightly in that I think that you, through your ethics, through your values, like your work ethic, right? So look, there's tasks I'm not going to be like, I don't know your task. I'm not going to do your task, but you're going to watch me and you're going to see that I work my tail off day in and day out, and I do what I say I'm going to do. My ethics and values are in there. I don't necessarily know how to do your job. It's okay if it's a 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 situation, but when you're a 1-on-6 or 1-on-8 or whatever, then you don't necessarily know how to do those tasks.
I will say it's comforting to know how to do all the tasks that my staff's working on. It makes me feel better about handing the task over and about knowing that the work product is, once it's done, is a good work product because I've done it before. But I also see where you're coming from. I also am going to give you the framework for you to work in. So I think a combination of
because
both.
there's plenty on the social media side that I've forgotten how to do certain things. I don't necessarily know my phone operating system and how that's tied into my CRM. And there's things that I've had to literally pull away from that I don't understand how they work. But my executive assistant, my operations person, they know what they're doing. They have those answers for me, and I've got some redundancy in those systems.
And I think that's great because that goes back to what we said earlier about you have to let go at some point and let other people do the work. But let's take a typical brick and mortar situation where you've got a front desk and you're serving a customer, right? Let's say there's a long line to the back, and you're the manager sitting in the back, and you see that long line. What are you going to do? Are you going to sit back and just let that long line be there? Or are you going to go up to the front? You're going to stumble your way through, but you're demonstrating to your employees that are up there handling this long line of customers that you're willing to jump in there and try to help. That's how you inspire people.
Yep, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I have a point I want to touch on. So you said, you lead by, or you inspire because you work your tail off. So what about for some of our listeners who are maybe on the they're trying to get out at the end of the day. They're working their way out of the business. They want to show that they're still there to support their team, but they've been doing this for a long time. They're ready to stop working their tail off. How do you inspire on your way out?
That's very interesting. I think that to me, it's about not building bridges. It's about not burning bridges. So if you've built something and you're trying to exit, don't you want to leave a legacy?
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about exiting the business altogether, or are you talking about I just want to leave at 5 o'clock?
I'm talking about, you've built this business up. I think we have a lot of listeners who have been working their entire life building this business. They're going to continue to be somewhat a part of it, but they're kind of trying to back away from a little bit and let it do its thing. So, yeah, sorry if the question wasn't clear.
Well, I think some of the integrity and the value by that point is already part of the culture now.
Right.
It's like I've created a culture, even in my business, which is still fairly small. I've got a team of 5 VAs, right? There's already instilled in that a value of work ethic, right? It's a thing that's already there. And if you can build that, everybody coming in is going to be tested to that and held to that.
So what you're saying is that your managers or your employees that are in place now will carry on that that integrity. Okay.
So, but that is by its extension of me because it's what I've instilled there, and that's how I've hired and how I've trained and how I've demonstrated. So, yeah, I think you can build that in so that you can still leave at 5 o'clock, or you can work 3 days a week. You know what I mean? Or you can that 4-hour work week's a real thing if you can build your team out properly. You don't have to be there, but that ethic needs to be, that seed, that whatever, that potted plant that's growing and thriving needs to already be there before you start stepping away.
I like that answer, Mark.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as leaders of an organization, and when you're managing now, you're managing and leading an organization, you really do have to set that foundation of how you do business, what your business stands for, those values, the ethic. That way we can empower teams with, hey, here's your expertise, as Alan has mentioned, here's your expertise, here's your lane, thrive, grow, and give them some autonomy to lead in their lane.
I was talking to somebody who's dealing with another virtual staffing company, and they were talking about how they've been going back and forth and trying to get an issue resolved, or they're not really responding to them, and it's been like a month. And I'm like, I can't even imagine. My team, whether I'm there or not, my team is on it like immediately. If there's an issue, there's that communication. Sometimes even on the weekends, they'll pick up on a message, we'll carry it through. It's like, I can't even imagine a week going by, or more than the weekend, if there's a weekend, but it should be like next day. So customer service is something that's woven in on the ethics of my company, and they understand that. So that's going to be there whether I'm there or not. So, but that just is an example. So, but speaking of small to medium businesses, in course, HR, awesome. Got to have HR in place. Another thing we have to be cognizant of is that, litigation can come out of nowhere, and it can be a problem. And one of the things that I'm excited about, that building a relationship with you early on as a brand new business guy, and we clicked, and you're a business attorney. I felt like I was growing a relationship with somebody who could be like my attorney at some point, and then ultimately became my attorney. For people who don't have a business attorney and they don't understand, there's the whole, you don't know what you don't know, right? And you're aware of a lot of that kind of stuff that business owners can face. If they don't have a relationship already with somebody, what's your recommendation and why?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's good to preemptively make that relationship just like you did, because at the end of the day, especially for a startup, because you came to me kind of in your startup phase, there's a lot going on. You have a lot going on, especially as a solopreneur, or even just a small medium business owner. You have a lot going on to worry about, all of this legal stuff that's also there and can also have really huge effects on your business at some point in time. So I think it's good to develop a relationship. And what does that look like? So I think that how you find your attorney is you reach out to other individuals that are probably in your field, and you start asking around. I think most of our clients come word of mouth. So I imagine that somebody talks to somebody else at some point in time, and then they send them our information, and we meet, and we talk about more than just the legal aspect of their business. We talk about, when you come and you see me for the first time, we're going to talk about what your goals are. What are you looking to do? I'm trying to learn as much about your business as I can, so I can anticipate where we're going. What kind of legal repercussions could I see in the future? And what can we do right now, today, to put ourselves in the best situation for any legal issues that pop up in the future? So I would meet with somebody. What we do at our firm is we have the kind of matter that we call, this is a general counsel matter. So a client comes on, maybe they don't need us for something right now, very, very specific. Maybe we're just looking at some documents, or maybe we're coming up with a few templates for them to incorporate in their business. But it's more of a general counsel situation, and they still have us on retainer, and they call me if they need something. They'll shoot me a document if they want us to look it over, or in the event that either they're threatened with litigation, or they need to pursue litigation, then we're there for that, and we're already ready to go. And it's one less thing for them to think about. There's
a peace of mind element or component to that. It was when you have somebody that that has got your back in the legal situation, you can actually approach or handle situations that might be adversarial in a more confident way. And I love using the cop analogy, because 90% or even more of what happens when you go to a scene is influenced by the behavior of the officer, the demeanor, the stance, the posture, the capability, the communication skills. Well, if you've got an attorney, as a business person, if you're faced with a difficult situation, you know you have an attorney, you don't have to be scared of the situation. You have somebody that can help, that you trust already, to take a look at things and make sure they got your back. It's a confidence. It's something that you're avoiding stress by just doing this in advance, and make sure your paperwork's, in place and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely echo that 100%. It's just, I don't think a lot of smaller businesses, they're not thinking that way.
And I think what you said about having somebody that you trust already is really important, because while I pride myself in our consultations in building that trust quickly, if we can already have that trust established, then you can call me and I can analyze the situation and say, hey, look, this is what I think. And especially if we've worked together in the past, you'll know, like, hey, I wasn't thinking that way, but if that's what he says, then, it's probably the direction we should go.
I have to build a correlation between what you just described and the HR partner inside of an organization.
Oh, yeah.
And who's often the first step prior going to the legal department.
Yeah.
And then we like having our legal department behind us as well, because there's that comfort, but that comes from building relationships.
Absolutely.
And
I had never thought of having an HR person in your back pocket kind of a situation.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So-
that's first step.
Let's talk about that for just a second then, because do you go on retainer like that for smaller businesses? And you say, hey, if you need an HR consultant, I can be that guy. Do you do that?
It's not something I have done, but certainly within the realm of possibility.
I could see as you're, networking, getting to know smaller business owners who don't have an HR department, that I could see some similarities.
Oh, I could see some real value there.
Oh, I take the occasional text message and phone call on just that exact topic. Just people in my community, in my circle. Just last week, I got a quick text. I gave him a quick answer, and then we moved on. Not something I charged for. Maybe I should have.
Well, yeah, if you're intentional about what you can do for the businesses and then making sure that's conveyed to them,
Yep.
this podcast is a good platform to actually start doing some of that. And, of course, your social media is doing well. You just push it out there and just say, hey, look, if you're a small business owner and you want to have
At my coach next door.
Yeah.
Well, I will
Shameless
tell
plug.
you that having an HR person in your back pocket, an attorney in your back pocket, that's a really smart business, a proactive strategy right there. Because many times when we're dealing with legalities, we're reacting as business owners.
Yep.
We're kind of being slapped with a lawsuit, or we're having to go seek an attorney. So being proactive like this, having an attorney that that you trust, and you already have that relationship, is a strategy. And it's a great proactive strategy to have. And then to go a step further and have Alan here as well, HR as a backup.
I think
Great
that's huge.
strategies.
And just to tag on to that a little bit, I also think a CPA is super important.
There you
Right.
go.
I think
Absolutely.
that those are.
It's the three-legged stool.
As soon as you can get rid of doing the books yourself is a huge thing. And then
yeah.
having somebody who knows what they're doing, make sure the IRS doesn't come back after you.
And help you make decisions or in a more of a forward-thinking manner rather than looking backwards.
Proactive
right?
as opposed to
Proactive
reactive.
versus
Yes.
reactive.
Yeah.
It's like,
Exactly.
look, the best defense is a great offense. That's the way I like to play.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of which, litigation is always an issue. If somebody is facing, when they get themselves into a crack and then the litigation is going to be coming, give us an overview of what that kind of
Process looks like?
Yeah, what does that unfold?
Yeah. So big on setting expectations. And I think that knowing the process, the litigation process, forward and backwards, enables me, our firm, to set expectations with clients. Let them know exactly what this is going to look like at the end of the day. So I think that the way that most all litigation starts off with is your client receives a demand letter of some sort. They'll get it from an attorney. And the reason that we send demand letters is, one, to put somebody on notice, maybe try and resolve the situation early on if possible. Also, sometimes if you don't have a contract with the individual that you're suing, you may be trying to get attorney's fees in the event that you do have to have a lawsuit, because in a contract, you can contract for attorney's fees, or you can they can be provided by statute. Those are the two ways to get attorney's fees: statute or by contract. So sometimes you have to provide a statutory notice in order to get attorney's fees. So you kick things off with a demand letter, and then if you were my client and you received a demand letter, you'd come to me, we'd look at it and we'd say, hey, does this claim really have merit? Do we really think that this is something that we should handle right now? And also we look at the situation and say, does this other person sending me the demand letter, are they really going to do something about it? Are they going to follow through? So sometimes, most of the time, our client has a better idea of that situation. They know if whoever's coming after them if they're really going to follow through or not. But we talk about it. You know,
Why would they do it if they're not going to follow through?
as a scare tactic to
bluff.
try and get
Okay.
quick,
Right.
It's
quick
like
money.
poker.
It
That's
is.
a very naive question.
A lot
I
of it
think.
is. A lot of it is bluff. Exactly. It's scary. It's scary when you're holding a piece of paper that says "I'm coming after you" and your small business for $100,000. It's scary. And of course, these numbers are inflated, and they anticipate all kinds of attorneys' fees and stuff like that. And so we start there, and we analyze. Is this something that's even worth responding to? And depending on what we decide, you go from there. And let's just say you don't end up working out the situation beforehand, then and then eventually, if they do choose to follow through, they're going to file a lawsuit. You're going to get served with a lawsuit, which is also scary. Somebody comes up to you and they hand you a document that says that you're being served and that you're being sued, and it's not, especially if it's somebody's first time, it's a little scary. So at that point, you are evaluating, again, the merits of the claim. You're looking at, do I have a claim against them too? I know that they're saying that I didn't do, if we're talking about a breach of contract or something like that, you're always looking at the elements of a breach of contract claim. And the elements of a breach of contract claim are that there was a contract in place, whether that be oral or written, that the plaintiff performed their obligations under the contract, that the defendant breached the contract, and then that there was damages as a result of the breach. Because if there's no damages, then there's really no, there's nothing to go after, right? So for in that particular claim, you would want to assess whether or not, if they're suing us, they're claiming that they performed. But if they didn't perform, do we have a counterclaim here? And so you're looking at counterclaim. You're looking at, did they sue the right party? I've had clients be involved in lawsuits just because their name showed up on the public records and they shouldn't have. And so they clearly were not liable, clearly were not involved in the litigation in any way, shape, or form. And so we've filed a motion to dismiss to get that resolved quickly, right in the beginning. And so that's kind of what the beginning looks like. And that really kicks off everything. And then after that, there's a bunch of deadlines that you're looking at. So generally speaking, after you've answered, you're going to enter into the discovery phase. So during this period, you are, if you're defending a lawsuit, well, either way, you're sending out discovery requests. So those come in the form of depositions, come in the form of interrogatories, which is just basically questions, written questions, admissions. I'm asking you to admit or deny certain topics so that, like, for example, if we're going back to those elements, I'm going to say, it probably wouldn't be the way that I'd phrase it, but, did you execute the contract? Actually, that may be the way I phrase it. I would say, did you execute Exhibit A, and you detached Exhibit A? And that takes away one of our elements, right? Because if they respond and they say, I admit, now that's an issue that we don't have to worry about in trial. That's already done. We know that there's a contract. Because sometimes that first element, is there a contract or is there not a contract, is you could spend hundreds of hours litigating whether or not there was a contract, especially if it's a verbal agreement. And so you'll enter into the discovery phase. You're learning more about the parties. You're learning more about the situation. You're questioning one of the parties.
Yeah, you're getting documents or getting stuff from them too, right?
Correct.
Like discovery kind of things. Like, hey, if you have this, produce it.
Yep, give it to me.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can see the whole picture, so that it puts you in a better spot to proceed with trial, to maybe make settlement offers if that's more appropriate. Maybe we decide to go to mediation. Which is all kind of the next steps after discovery. If you have a very, very compelling case, or if you feel as though the opposing party doesn't hit one of those elements, going back to the breach of contract, if they don't hit one of those 4 elements, you can file what's called a motion for summary judgment, where you can say basically, hey, judge, the facts are so overwhelmingly in our favor that there's really no issues for us to go to trial over. You should just rule on it right now. Or the other side doesn't have enough facts to be able to hit all those elements, therefore you should dismiss this, or at least dismiss this in part, or something like that. And then really from there, it's mediation, followed by some pre-trial motions and stuff, and then trial.
You ever do arbitration as well?
We do, yep. We're involved in some arbitration right now, which is really just an expedited private court at the end of the day.
And the difference between mediation and arbitration?
Mediation you can walk away from. You can say, I'm not agreeing to this. Arbitration is a binding decision.
Gotcha. I just wanted to clarify for those who didn't know. I already knew, though. All right, cool. All right, so thanks for the rundown on that, Keaton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's what to expect.
Masterclass right there.
Absolutely.
So the end of the year is coming up, Desiree, and I know you're the nonprofit guru, of course, here in San Antonio area, probably all of Texas. But anyway,
a lot of it, yeah.
yeah. You're like a wizard at when it comes to the nonprofit stuff. So much information there, so much expertise. All right, end of the year's coming up. Any tips or insight, or hey, for you business out there, whether or not you want to get involved in it before the end of the year, or you want to wrap up some stuff, what would you have for them?
As the year ends for the nonprofit industry, there's a couple of deadlines that I like to remind clients, those nonprofit clients, and also business clients too, to give them some clarity. One, the end of the year, December 31st, that is the IRS deadline when it comes to charitable donations. So any charitable donations that you want to make that will be tax deductible to a 501c3 type of nonprofit, because very important to note that 501c3s are the ones that get that charitable tax-free deduction. That's why people go after the covenant 501c3 versus a C4 or C6 or any other type of designation for that matter. So specifically speaking for 501c3s, December 31st is an important deadline right there for those making charitable donations. Keep in mind business owners as well. There are you can also write off some as business expenses when you're making donations. They don't necessarily have to be donation, because the IRS does have restriction. You want to check with your CPA on this, but there is a restriction when it comes to corporate donations, right? I believe it's like up to 25% versus an individual, which gets 100% type of deductibility. Mm-hmm. So businesses, talk to your CPA proactively, go talk to them, let them know as the year closes, how can I take advantage of any type of charitable donations, one, by the deadline of December 31st. But two, if you are a nonprofit organization, it's important to know when your accounting period ends, and it ends different for every nonprofit. When you go for designation with the IRS and you're seeking that designation by way of an application, that is when you designate when your accounting period ends, which the IRS uses that time frame. 15 days after is when that's when you're annually filing your taxes. So, very different than businesses, individuals, and so forth. So one thing I do recommend to those nonprofit clients, go into the IRS charitable database, look up your designation, get your designation letter, and see what your accounting period is. That way you accurately at least know when your accounting period ends. I mean, again, most nonprofits do have their own CPA, but as a leader and as someone that may be part of the board, it's good information to have. That way you know exactly when your organization should be filing. But again, very important deadline of the 31st. Those that are giving to nonprofits, make sure to make those contributions before the year's end.
Now, so give me a quick summary of the services that you perform as a business for people who are interested in that nonprofit circle.
And I'm going to really hone in on the nonprofit services I offer, because Publicity, again, is kind of my overall umbrella, which includes high-profile event planning. But again, my niche really is the nonprofit sector. And I have clients that are different types of nonprofits, but specifically 501c3, 4, and 6s. So those type of organizations are services that I provide for. So one, I help start up a nonprofit. When you are seeking a designation, you do have to know what type of nonprofit that you'd like to establish. So one, if Alan comes to me and says, Desiree, here's my vision. I want to go and help, maybe with food deserts, right? Areas that have food deserts, but then tells me, but I want to go to Austin and I want to go to legislators and I want to lobby on behalf of this particular issue. Well, in that case, I have to say, wait, pump the brakes. You're talking about an advocacy group, not necessarily a charitable group, because the IRS has very strict rules when it comes to any type of legislative or political influence or activity. So you really have to understand what type of nonprofit, what activities the nonprofit intends on having, because that's going to determine what designation you're going to be seeking. The last thing you want is to set up a 501c3 for a client and then client says, hey, I'm going to go and start lobbying or influencing legislation, or even worse, says something like, hey, my nonprofit endorses this political candidate, that's one way to get the IRS to cut your designation very quickly. So that's startup is one of the things that I help nonprofits understand their why, but understand their actions. And that will tell me what type of nonprofit is the best fit for them.
Right, because a lot of people may not even know that. And of course, saying, hey, these are your limitations.
Absolutely.
How is it that you know all of this stuff? Did you go to school for it?
was
Did you
wondering
learn
that
it? Yeah,
too.
where did
Both.
this?
It's theory and practice. Again, I always like to flex that I was a professor for 10 years. And, but I was also in practice at the same time. And I mean, it's just over years. Undergrad is really where I started, and that was a billion years ago. UTSA, 15 plus years ago, they started an undergrad minor, and it was nonprofit management. So I started off there, and again, one of my first PR jobs was at a 501c3. And I just saw how fabulous it was and started understanding the admin part of it. So I really wanted to build an expertise on it. So I went, again, got classically trained. Learned the theory in the books and practice it at the same time. That's where you get a lot of rich knowledge and practice, in my opinion. And so, again, the nonprofit industry, there's a lot of nuances that you really have to know. And over time, you understand, okay, hey, this is going to be the best fit for this mission. This is going to be the best way to organize this organization. But it takes a lot more understanding than the formalities of filing. There's also the strategy behind it, pulling out that why, pulling out the activities that the nonprofit wants to realize. So that's just one of the things that I help with startup. That's critical, right?
Do you help with board formation?
And so that's part of the service as well. I like to tell people there are a lot of AIs. There's a lot of primitive AIs out there that have existed that we don't know about, right? Or that we didn't realize, I guess we should say. LegalZoom being one of them, right? LegalZoom was an AI that you can type in. You still can. You can type in information and it'll spit out documents to you. What do you do with those documents?
I call it legal doom.
Right. I say this a lot. LegalZoom has made me so much money. I have so many clients that have come to me and said, here are these documents that I got from LegalZoom, and I have no idea what to do with them. And
Interestingly, so Keaton, I saw you perk up here when she's talking, but I actually have a question about, do you partner with law firms that help with this stuff? Are the law firms specialized in that? Or how do you go from, an advisory capacity to flux capacitor. That's what I was going. How do you go from advisory to the actual legal execution of things?
Well, the legal execution, you'll be surprised. First of all, you don't necessarily need an attorney to set up a nonprofit, a business, but you do need an expert who knows how to navigate those waters. And I have consulted with attorneys that are friends every now and then, and many of them, it's not their expertise. Many times, if you do have the knowledge that I have, you may be a tax attorney. But even then, a tax attorney is well-versed on the 501c code, right? But I'm more versed on the strategy behind it, but I know the process. I know how to navigate through the application. So application to apply as a nonprofit is very similar to grant writing. So that's one of the things, again, one of the skills that I have in my warehouse, right? So I've learned my know-how through this. Knock on wood, I haven't encountered a time where I've had to bring in an attorney because of legalese. That's something that I don't really see in the industry.
Sounds the other way. Like the attorneys would be maybe sending people to you for that consultation. What are your thoughts there, Keaton? As far as that specialty, obviously she brings a lot to the table when it comes to the nonprofits. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that because you're absolutely right. Anybody can go online and file their LLC. Anybody can or their 501c3. That's all fine and dandy. Now, I like to get into the nuance a little bit. When you're filling out this form, it is a public document,
Yes.
so you want to be careful about what you're putting on this form because everybody's going to know. And so there's some things that you can put in place in order to reduce maybe your online exposure, where you live,
Yes.
interesting stuff like that. But I think the real value comes into play when you're after the fact, or when you're explaining, here's how you run this business, and kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. Here's all these steps that you can put in place to make things easier for you down the future, and actually get the wheels turning. And I think that's kind of where you come in, right?
Right. And again, one of the things that I largely help, it very much helps that I know the process behind it, right? I know how to navigate the water. Okay, here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the state of Texas. We're going to fill out with the Secretary of State, to know that how that maps out. That helps. But again, what I give a lot is to my clients is homework. Figuring out the why, figuring out the mission, the vision, the values, what you stand for, helping them set up that structure, that foundation right there. Because again, LegalZoom produces these legal documents all day. I'm not going to say they're easy documents by any means, but it's pretty easy for you to file. But it's very easy for you to mess up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Once you mess up, that's it.
As we're getting close to wrap up, I did have a question that might be a little controversial. But when it comes to somebody wanting to start a nonprofit, they just want some place to dump their money. They want the tax benefit. They want to be able to say, hey, we're involved with XYZ, or this is our whatever. Have you ever had a situation that came to you like that was really empty of heart and soul that you walked away from?
Well, one, I will tell you, if you are seeking a 501c3 designation, there's two types of nonprofits that the IRS distinguishes. And one of them is a foundation, and the other one is a publicly supported charity. So let's just say the Nation Foundation. The majority of that money is coming from a single source, right? The family assets. However, other nonprofits I see they're supported publicly. So the IRS will differentiate between, okay, are they getting this money from a single source? In that case, they are going to be designated as a foundation. However, if this is publicly supported nonprofit, meaning they're getting at least 10% from public type of supports, grants, donations, sponsorships, well, then they can be designated as just a typical charitable nonprofit that can receive grants, it can receive donations, and so forth. So I personally have not ever encountered that, where one person is just saying, hey, I kind of want the tax write-off. I will tell you there are new products out there. A very interesting product that has just hit the market that's really becoming known in the past 2 years. They're called donor advised funds. So donor advised funds are an incredible financial product that help individuals. So if I have individual wealth and I'm saying, geez, I want to start a nonprofit, but it takes a lot of time to run a nonprofit. It takes recruitment. You have to build a board. The state of Texas says you have to have at least 3 board members. So here in Texas, we do need at least 3 board members on a nonprofit organization, no matter what type of designation you are. So if you have that time to start a nonprofit, you do have to have a board. But a donor advised fund allows an individual to put money into a certain type of account that is considered a 501c3. It's considered a 501c3 kind of savings and investment account. And it's used, tell my clients, it's like a cash app. If Alan has a donor advised fund and he's putting in, let's just say $100,000. One, he'll get the write-off that year of that $100,000. But 2, he can spend it and allocate it throughout different nonprofits whenever he wants. In 2025, 2026, whenever he would like to.
That's cool.
But he can get that write-off for
this year. Yes. So
But I assume you're not pulling that out. When those funds are in that account,
it has to
there.
stay. It has to go to other 501c3 nonprofits,
Is it
right?
interest-bearing?
And it is interest bearing, so it can be. And it's not just money. You can give all types of assets through donor advised funds. So if there is an individual that feels like I want to get that tax write off, now the IRS is making it very easy. You don't have to go that old traditional route and start a nonprofit organization. Now you can create a donor advised fund, and you don't have to run a nonprofit. You can find causes that you want to send money to.
Love it.
Love it.
Love
It's
that.
fantastic.
All right, I think that was our big learning point for today anyway. We learned a lot, but thanks, Desiree, for that. Appreciate it. All right, well, good job, everybody. I think
Thanks,
we
Mark.
went around the room here pretty well, and I think our listeners are going to learn a lot. I know I did. So as we wrap up the show, a quick reminder, check out our latest podcast and catch video versions of the show anytime by visiting our website at satalkradio.com. That's going to be it for this one. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one.